Hi, Ken1171 here, and in this video we're going to talk about a new script I have created called chain control. Let's launch it and look what it looks like. This is the interface. It's pretty simple and straightforward. It may look kind of overwhelming at first, but once you understand what each section means, you'll see that it's actually plain simple. To test this script, I have this whip with 54 segments that I created for an outfit. And it was designed to bend pretty well and fast. I think has 1,000 polys total, which is pretty. That's going to be important in this demo because when we use the chain control, we are animating or posing things in real time. So let's take a look. From the top, it has the name of the segment I have selected, which is whip 1. That's this one. If I select the beginning here, it's called a handle. And from that point on, the second part means I have 55 segments after the one that is selected. If I select here, for example, from this point on, it's segment 47. It tells me that from that point on, I only have 8 bones to pose. So let's take a look on how can I pose things. You'll notice I have 4 sections for bending called chain bend, S bend, wave bend, and spiral bend. Chain bend works pretty much like when you bend something in Poser with a bend dial. What it does is it applies a certain angle to that point in relation to its parent. And what happens here with chain bend means that it affects this segment here, the 47, the one I have selected there, and all the rest of the bones that are below it. If you look at the hierarchy editor here, if I expand the whip, you'll see that it has a lot of bones, up to 54 that at the end. This is what a chain means. It's several bones chained together. And that's the typical way that things like whips, tentacles, and ropes are modeled. They are a chain of bones. That's what gave the script its name, chain control. So I am now at chain 42, and if I start chain bending, take a look what happens. Starting from segment 42, which is that one, bending does what you more or less expect. It's bending the chain, but only from that point on, it only affects these many bones, like 13 from segment 42. I can bend this chain, and you see when the dial gets to the end, it doesn't mean I cannot keep bending them. It just means I need to reset. And if you look at the tooltips, it says that if I right-click this dial, I can send it back to the center, and I can keep bending after that. Set it again, keep bending. I had 13 bones, and if I look close here, you'll see that 13 bones, after this many bendings, you start getting faceted, which means I don't have enough bones to bend any better. But depending on the distance you're looking at from, it may look like pretty good. Now, another thing you can do is if you control right-click the slider, it not only brings the dial to the center, but it also resets this x-axis or whatever axis I am resetting. It resets this segment and all the child, which means all 13 bones after it. So let's take a look on the difference between the bending methods. Chain bend does more or less what you would expect. It bends all segments in equal amounts, so that if you go after a certain point, the chain starts curling upon itself. And it forms kind of a circle. If I bend in the z-axis, you will notice that you don't know actually what's going to be bending on X, Y, and Z, because depending on how things were rigged, it's the person who rigs who decides in what direction the axes go. So in this case, Y, let me reset the chain first, Y goes straight up, so Y goes along the chain. So if I dial X, what I'm doing, you can actually see what's happening there, but it's twisting itself. So from this angle, it doesn't look like it's doing anything. But if I bend it to a side, and then you see that's a one-dimensional bend in only one axis, it looks plain if you look from the side. But if I add a twist to it, it kind of makes this kind of shape. So you have to play along with what axes do what, because different items will have different meanings for X, Y, and Z. If I add a Z bend, it starts kind of spiraling, but you'll see it's still making circles along the bend. And that's the kind of result you can expect. The reset button, if I just control right click on a specific axis, it only resets that axis. But if I click on the reset button, it resets all three at the same time, which can save you some time. That has the same effect as if I have used all three dials, and if I control right click each one individually, that does the same as reset button. All right, that was the bend, which is pretty straightforward. Now the S bend, what it does is it creates a shape like an S. And what this is actually doing is, after it bends up to the half in one direction, it changes to the other one. And that creates this S shape that if I keep going in the same direction, you start making a figure 8. As you can see here, when it starts bending over itself, it starts making a figure 8. And if I add a twist to it, you can get some pretty interesting kinds of curves, like this shape, for example. It has curls, but an S in the middle. And if I continue doing this to the other axis, you can make it even more interesting shapes. Of course, you can still mix this with bending into a regular chain bend and adding twists and things like that. You can get pretty complex shapes by combining different bending methods like this. And of course, you can start bending from anywhere you like and keep adding different kinds of bends to different parts of the chain individually. All right, that was the S bend. Let me reset. And now let's take a look on the wave bend, which is one of the most interesting ones. What the wave bend does is, like the name says, it creates a kind of a wave. And this one has a parameter. All the others don't have any, but this one has a parameter you can add it, which is the wave frequency. The default is 6, and if you look at the tooltip, you can go up to 9 and a minimum of 1. It's easier to explain this if I explain the frequency by the number of times the curve changes direction across the length of the whip. So it was going this way, now going this way. If you count the many times it changes direction, it's going to be 6 times. Meaning that if I reset this and set it to 1 and bend it again, it never changes direction. But if I reset this and set the frequency to 2, now it changes direction once. And you notice that it starts looking like the first and the second kinds of bend. So you can simulate that with the chain bend by changing the parameter. And Um, if I set this to 4, it should change directions 4 times um, while it's doing the bend. Now, as the first one will create a circle and the second one will create a figure 8, this one, no, I think it's the opposite. This one creates a figure 8 when you bend it, and but depending on how many uh, turns it does, you can create some pretty interesting shapes. Look at this. And that's in one dimension only. If you add a twist to this, it can get even crazier. Look at that. Um, that's the power of the wave band with a parameter. If I change this to 9, which is the maximum, and start bending, you'll see that it changes direction so many times that you can make some pretty complex curves with this. All right, if you right-click the parameter, it resets it to default values. All this is in the tooltips you can see here when you hover the mouse over the controls. All right, let's reset this and let's go to the last kind of um, bending, which is spiral. Spiral is similar to bend, but there is one difference. Let me show you. It's better than explaining. Instead of bending over itself, it bends over a spiral like this. And you can combine this with regular bend to accentuate or maybe do the opposite. And if you add a twist, you can make it 3-dimensional instead of bending over a plane. So these are all the kinds of bends, and you can get pretty interesting results by combining them in any way you see fit. So that covers all the kinds of bends. Now, I want to show one more example instead of a whip, a rope. And here I have a rope made by a vendor called Mochi from Japan, where he modeled this rope. And you'll notice if you expand, it doesn't have many segments. It has a total of 16 total, which is not much. And we'll see some of what happens if you don't have enough segments to bend a chain. What happens? So I'll select the first segment here, and let's start bending. The direction things are going to bend varies a lot, as I said before, because you don't know what direction it's going to be until you try. So x-axis is doing pretty much what it did with the whip. It starts folding against itself. As you can see here, it's one-dimensional. If I would add a twist, you can make it 3-dimensional like this. And I wanted to show how you can pose this rope so you can tie something with it in your scene. So first step would be to curl it over itself this many times as you need, and then give it a twist to decide how thick you want it to be, like this. Up to you how many you want to make it. And then by selecting the body, I can scale it up, or the opposite, scale it down to make it, I don't know what X does in this. Let's try, yeah. Y-axis, make it narrow. So if you need, instead of a perfect circle, something that's oval or any other shape, you can scale this in the appropriate axis to get the shape you want. And then you can keep folding it over itself. As you can see, it's already kind of reaching the limit of how many polys it has until it gets into a kind of rectangle shape. I think that's the limit of how far I can push it. But this is a pretty decent tie rope pose that you can use in your scenes to tie something up. like, for example, tie a character's hands. You can put both wrists in this hole here, and it will look like it's uh, tying the person up. You can make it looser or tighter uh, using the Y twist, or of course, depending on what kind of item you are posing, it may be a different axis, but you get the idea. This is what I wanted to show as a last example, and that's about it. I think I explained everything. As usual, if you have doubts, you can click the question mark and open the PDF manual at any time. And a new feature in my scripts is the auto docking toggle. So if you don't want the script to auto dock into Poser like it's doing here when you drag it, you can click this icon here and it grays out. Now it won't dock into Poser anymore, no matter where you put it. And this can be helpful in some cases. It will remember this setting when you close the script. The next time you run it, it will remember what the setting was. And that's what I wanted to show you. Thanks for watching.